All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Mohit. I'm a developer advocate here at Salesforce. And welcome to Ask Me Anything session for the month of August. We have amazing experts today and also a very exciting topic on building agentic experiences with our one of the wonderful partners, AWS and Salesforce. Before we begin this AMA, I just want to remind all of you that you have access to chat. So feel free to use that chat, whether you're streaming on LinkedIn or YouTube. There's a chat window right there. Make sure you add in all your questions. Remember, no question is silly for us. Get in all your questions, and we have some amazing experts here. Now, before I get to the experts and let them introduce themselves, I just want to cover a few housekeeping stuff here. So, how about I bring the slide and let's actually cover some housekeeping items here. All right. So with that, right, I just want to remind everyone today we have product management here. So this is our forward-looking statement. Please make your purchasing decisions on features that are currently available in the product. Now, with that out of our way, I just want to remind everyone about our Salesforce developers global community. You can find that community using that URL that I've shared there. And this is where we all come together and collaborate and network. Even after this episode, you can put all your questions. It need not be specific to this session. Anything in general related to Salesforce, Agentforce, anything related to Salesforce platform development, MuleSoft development, feel free to join this community. We have grown to more than 10,000 at this time, even beyond that. So really looking forward to network with you there. And this is an excellent forum for you to place your questions. With that out of our way, I would want to introduce you to our experts, and I'll let them introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Tyson. Tyson, would you want to introduce yourself here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Tyson Reed. I'm a Senior Director of Product Management, working on event-driven integration. So really excited to chat with everybody about what we've built for connecting Salesforce and Amazon with Event Relay, and also just some of our more foundational event-driven aspects like platform events and change data capture.
Awesome,
Ross?
awesome, and thank you so much, Tyson, for joining us. I know you're busy shipping a lot of things, but really appreciate your time for our developers here. Ross, welcome again.
Hey everybody, Ross Belmont on the same team as Tyson for today's conversation. Technologies like external services, name credentials, and Private Connect, all of which also help in the mix as you're crafting those solutions that connect Salesforce to Amazon and other similar systems.
Awesome, awesome. Now, I just wanted to remind everyone that before we actually get into taking your questions, I want to take some moment and cover some initial content so that everyone is on the same page. So, how about I bring this presentation and hand over to you, Ross, so you can walk us through some of these content, so we all are on the same page here.
Yeah, all right. So we're going to get going and move through these slides, and we'll then get to the questions, which is why we're all here today. So, if you may or may not be familiar with the extent of the Salesforce and Amazon global strategic partnership, it's something that's been in place for a while. Like you've probably heard of Hyperforce, right? So, relying on the very robust cloud infrastructure that Amazon brings to bear for your Hyperforce installations is something that we've been investing in for a while. And then we take it to the next level with a number of product innovations that we built hand in hand with the folks at AWS. We're literally on calls with them almost every week to deliver better outcomes for our mutual customers. There have been things in the MuleSoft space, data cloud, industries, many other examples that we're not going to spend a ton of time on today, but we're excited to talk about how this is taken to the next level in the space of Agentforce, and how agentic solutions then can be integrated using a variety of technical means, which we'll both cover. So an extension to a great partnership we have with our pals at AWS. So as we move to the next slide, we'll get to a little more to the meat of that third piece that was on the right-hand column there on the previous slide. How do you get your Agentforce agents and your Bedrock agents to communicate? What are the options there? How does it work? This is what we're going to walk through today. So we've got a mixture of synchronous options for your architecture and asynchronous eventing based, right? So we're going to touch on each one in turn and sort of walk through the steps of how that works. So let's move to the next slide and get into it. Excuse me. So we'll start with synchronous, just a little bit simpler to understand, and I'll touch on that piece, and then I'll toss it over to Ty on the asynchronous piece. So we can move forward, and you'll see how it's there's actually some nice mirror images and how Amazon's Bedrock organizes itself that mirrors what you're used to at Salesforce. So let's move to the next slide. We can scoot past this and go even one more. And here's that alignment that I was describing as you sort of look at the right-hand side of the screen here and see how the pieces line up as you go block to block, top to bottom. Right, so as you've probably heard of in Agentforce, agents are configured via topics, right, that we have in Salesforce. And then as agents take actions, right, the topics include one or more actions. Those can be invocable actions that are backed by external services, which we've had in the platform for some years now. And that can power a name credential based call out, which can head over to the Amazon side, even using Private Connect. Right. So if you've not heard of external services, that's a way to take any external endpoint that you want to interact with and using its open API spec, capture that in Salesforce in a way that can be used declaratively in Flow, Apex, other places, and now, excitingly, Agentforce. And then we see that on the right-hand side, Amazon has something similar in their Bedrock configuration. They group actions into something just simply called an action group. That will be a collection of actions that a given agent can take, right? And in the case of the AWS side making its own callouts, they also have a similar contract that's based, similar concept that's based on the open API schema of your target endpoint. So similar constructs as you're configuring top to bottom. And then even if you just focus on the Agentforce piece and how it makes callouts, this technology, this approach, this capability can be used regardless of whatever endpoints on the other side, AWS or not, as long as we can make that call out over HTTP to your target. Okay, so we can move on to the next slide, and we'll now. That was a synchronous call out, right? In the case of name credentials, simple HTTP call out that's just synchronous. Call out with the request, wait for the response, process it in Agentforce or in Salesforce. And I'm going to turn it over to Ty, who's going to tell you about what it looks like to use that in an asynchronous, event-oriented way.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. So a lot of what Ross was just talking about how you expose custom actions as a way to kind of bring in Agentforce, it works the same way for events. So the little connective tissue that you've got between Salesforce and AWS is going to be the Salesforce event relay. That's that box down here at the bottom between Agentforce and our external AWS Bedrock agents. And we're going to talk a little bit more about event relay, but very briefly, what it is it's essentially a connector for all of your events. So think platform events, think change data capture. And what it means is that Agentforce is able to communicate with AWS via events and event relay. So let's head to the next slide and get into a little bit more detail on that. And the big take home that I want everybody to have that's joining us today is just that Agentforce fits into your event-driven architectures today. Agents can tap into all of the event-driven integrations that you have in your org. They can use all of the evented flows and all of the evented Apex. And let's keep going. And the reason why that is that you can convert any Apex or any flow to a custom agent action, right? And that means that you're able to have Agentforce taking advantage of all of that event-driven automation that you already have in your org. And because of the way the Salesforce event bus works, all of the subscribers that can receive the events that are being published by Apex and Flow and Agentforce on top of that are able to tap into those events that are coming from an agent. So that means an agent can publish an event. You can be talking to an agent, you can invoke an agent, that agent can publish an event that hits the Salesforce event bus, and that event is then available for all of your subscribers. And those, in this case, we're talking about multi-agent integration. That can be agents. It doesn't have to be agents. If you have existing systems that are already integrated with Salesforce via events, an agent can publish events onto those same underlying topics and make them available for your external systems to consume. Same story with subscribers that are inside Salesforce. If you have flows that are subscribing to platform events, an agent can publish an event and trigger that subscriber. And that's going to be the same story if that agent is in Salesforce and it's an Agentforce agent, or if it's an agent that's sitting outside of Salesforce, like a Bedrock agent. So the take home that I want you all to have is that all of the work that we've done and all of the ways that we've built event-driven architectures, Agentforce really just sits in as a layer on top of all of that automation that you drive with Apex and Flow. So it really is a first-class actor to be able to be invoked by events and also to create events that then touch off all of the other automation that you've got and all the other integrations that you've got. So I think the next slide is kind of the wrap up where we're trying to make a case for, like, the way to think about this is you've got your event publishers that put events onto the Salesforce event bus. You've got your event subscribers that are consuming those events or at least reading those events.
Mhm.
And then agents are just sitting, on either way. Agents can publish events and they can subscribe to them.
Perfect. And I hope, with this, it gave you a little more context around what we are building here and what are the capabilities that we have. Again, I just want to remind everyone, the chats are open, so feel free to ask your questions. This is your opportunity to get all your pressing questions answered. With that, let's take out the slides and let's look at some of the questions that are already coming in from our developers here. So first, I want to take a question from Sally. Sally joins us from Toronto. Welcome, Sally. Thanks for your time and thanks for your question. So what is the difference between the flow versus making regular HTTP requests to an exposed API from AWS?
I'll go ahead and take that one. So if you have used external services capabilities in Flow, that's the same technological basis for what we're talking about here. It would be just that Agentforce is your sort of automation solution instead of the deterministic flow configuration that you're all used to, right? But both tools, as well as Apex, as well as Omni Studio, as well as others that are likely to be in the future, can use external services to make those callouts to the target endpoint defined by the name credential. So I hope that helps.
Awesome. There's a really interesting question that is coming from one of our LinkedIn subscribers. They're just wondering, why are we not using A2A protocol for this integration, and why are we using this name credential approach?
Sure. So I'll start, and then Ty, if you have any other color you want to add, because I know you did some writing on this. Feel free afterwards. So we are, like I said, working with AWS on a weekly, bi-weekly basis. I've been in that place, Ty and I, for the past 2+ years, right? So we are working hand in hand. Both of us, respectively, are sort of shoring up our capabilities there to get the A2A piece stood up and in motion. You'll hear more from the Agentforce team itself on when and how Agentforce agents will have the skills pieces attached, etc., that A2A implies, right? Separate from how two systems communicate, which is, a little bit more of the focus here today. So if you saw the Agentforce 3 announcements a month or two ago, roughly, right, you probably saw the mention of both MCP and A2A. That's still on the Agentforce team's roadmap, but it's part of everything else that they're trying to tackle, and I'm sure we'll get to that in due time.
Awesome. The next question here is from Jeffrey from YouTube. Jeffrey, thanks for your question. So is that the event bus same as what MuleSoft interacts with? So other systems can trigger events and those events to this SF event bus. They're just wondering, is it the same event bus that they can use for the MuleSoft interactions?
Yep, that's a great question. So the short answer is yes. The MuleSoft does connect to the Salesforce event bus. There's two different connectors that you can use. You can use the Salesforce connector and you can use the PubSub API connector, but they're both connecting to the same underlying infrastructure. So the way I'd think about it is the events are all coming and they're coming and going from many different directions, but it all transits through the same underlying place. When you are thinking about connecting MuleSoft to the Salesforce Event Bus, my recommendation is to use the PubSub API connector, just because you are able to tap into some of the expanded capabilities that PubSub has that the Salesforce connector doesn't. The Salesforce connector is publishing events via the REST API, which works, but it doesn't offer real-time publish acknowledgments like the PubSub API. So that's why we encourage folks, when they are working with MuleSoft, to use the new stuff.
Got it. Yes, if you're working with MuleSoft, rule of thumb, always use that, the PubSub API. So the next question that we have is coming from Beach from LinkedIn. Beach, thanks for joining and thanks for your question. So there are synchronous and asynchronous event publishing handling in Apex. How do agents handle event publishing issues? Like, for example, service outages and things like that.
Yeah, it's a great question. So this is an awesome question because it goes super deep in terms of like, hey, when I'm gonna take a piece of Apex code that publishes an event and I'm going to have an agent invoke that Apex code, how do I do that? And like, what's the best practices for being able to have that work end to end? Right now, you'll see that when you play with this in Agentforce Studio and you try to publish an event, you do get that success or failure mode, like in Agent Studio. You see whether the transaction went through. You see what the contents of the event payload was. So you can see that while you're playing with it. But where we're going with this is kind of like, great, in that error scenario, what do you do if there's a failure? And you can do that at a couple different layers. Some of it is like there is that built-in resiliency at the Agentforce layer where the agent can fall back and the agent can try again and the agent can ask for more questions. So sometimes the agent itself can do a republish if you're trying to do a synchronous Apex transaction. The other option is if you're thinking about like, okay, maybe you're trying to reuse a piece of Apex that is working asynchronously and you're publishing the events asynchronously. That's an opportunity to think about things like Apex publish callbacks, where you're trying to have that Apex trigger retry and make sure that the event is successfully published. So I feel like there's a couple different ways to go about it. And a lot of it is just going to come down to like how you want to surface that error handling and what's the right experience that you're trying to land on. Like if you're building a customer facing agent versus building something that's going to be internal, or building something that's potentially like headless and you're not interacting with. It could be an autonomous agent where you might want to make some nuanced decisions about how you want that error handling to work. But those are kind of the two layers to think about it. You either handle it at the Apex layer or you handle it at the agent layer.
Got it. And both have its own pros and cons, and definitely, both impact the user experience here. So thank you for that. The next question is coming from Varuna from LinkedIn. New developer orgs got an agent account summary, and this agent looks at the data in Salesforce objects, gives an account summary. Can this be modified to look at data in Salesforce and data pulled from an API, from an external system to give an account summary? This is more, I don't think this is more of agentic experiences question, but this is more around a solution, right? Like they already have this account summary. They want to make sure, like, how do we build this kind of a agent, which not only just uses data from Salesforce, but let's say some third-party integrations to do some agentic work.
I'll take a crack at it. I am not off the top of my head familiar with whether or not you can directly edit a built-in topic configuration like that, like you're describing, right? Although if you cannot, what I would look at is the prompt template configuration. It's pretty flexible with how it reads data and gives a record snapshot. You may have seen that capability. I would Google around for that. For example, one of the things it does is it has extra intelligence to pull in related information about a contact based on the related lists on screen. So that's pretty handy, because then you could put other types of data, maybe remove a piece that you're not using that's on the standard layouts, and you put your own piece in place, right? And it'll read that data in as well. So I would take a look at that, and also triangulate against whether or not those out-of-box topic configurations can be directly edited, or if you'd have to somehow clone it, you know what I mean, or and make your own
Yeah.
copy.
Yeah, makes sense. There is another question here for you, Tyson. So, should I use platform events or the Agent API to integrate with Agentforce?
This is a great question. I think like this is again going to be probably an overly nuanced answer, because it is sort of it depends. I think so the advice that I have for people is thinking about what they're trying to do end to end with their integration. So if they just want to signal and they want to be able to reuse it to do a lot of different things, then I steer them down the platform events route. Just because once you get that platform event into Salesforce from your external system, now you can trigger an agent. Now you can trigger a flow. You can trigger Apex. You can send that event back out of Salesforce if you need to. So if you have it coming through as an event, it gives you a lot more options, and it allows you to kind of build on that more easily in the future. If you integrate directly against the Agent API, that's great. It's going to hit the Agent API, and you're going to be able to invoke Agentforce, but you're not necessarily like you're moving where all of your automation goes from like a centralized PubSub model that's like built for this, to then going at the agent layer and trying to reach down into other parts of Salesforce. So I think it's you can absolutely do it either way, but I think that the use cases that make a lot of sense is when you've got something that's really straightforward and you just want to call the Agent API to say, hey, Agentforce, like pass this through the Atlas reasoning engine, invoke the actions that we need to invoke, and like a really tight, simple use case. If you see a lot of reusability to the contents of that platform event that you're publishing, to me, that's always the sign like, hey, just publish as at a platform event and then use automation within Salesforce to bring in Agentforce. So hopefully that helps. That's usually the way I think about it. For just kind of like architecturally, how do you balance a lot of this?
Got it. Awesome. The next question we have is again from Beach from LinkedIn. Are there scaling options such as with parallel event subscriptions where you can control how many agent instances can run at once to process these incoming events?
Yeah, I'm thinking about this. So in this scenario, what we've got is we've got events that are being published, and you're trying to figure out how do you handle sending those events to multiple agents
Yeah,
that
exactly.
need
I
to
think
interact with them.
yeah, it's one of those scenarios where we can think
Yeah.
of like let's say a website which has
Right.
been opened and thousands of customers are browsing through the website. And now you have like a centralized event that everybody is trying to consume. I think
Right.
that's
And then what you're trying to do is you're trying to pass all of that interaction through to Agentforce.
Yeah.
So in my mind, because I'm thinking about if you would really want to use parallel subscriptions. You could break up the Apex triggers and then have all of those individual Apex triggers invoke the Agentforce action to invoke the agent. Under the hood, you're going to be invoking the same underlying agent multiple times.
Got it.
So I think it's something that you could do.
Yeah.
The-
What I understand is the parallel event. When you talk about parallel event subscription, this is more useful when you have like bunch of events coming up all together in bulk in one of
Right.
these instances, and then you can, instead of processing them sequentially, you could just group them or partition them and then do parallel processing on them. I think that would be the right use case for this when you have bulk of events to quickly subscribe to and process them. But I think for like handling these subscriptions, I think it's more of an internal implementation that
Yeah, and I think it's gonna like what you just touched on about like what does that traffic pattern look like? that's going to be the real thing that's going to shift you one way or another. If you've got really bursty traffic and you've got like a latency target that you're trying to hit, that's when parallel subscriptions start to make more sense.
Mm-hmm.
If you're attaching an agent on the back end of all of that, like I'm wondering, like, is that really going to improve? Like, that might improve the speed at which you throw everything at Agentforce, but I don't know if that's going to improve the speed at which Agentforce actually gets through all of the stuff that you threw at it. So that to me, that would be a good scenario to perf test. There's going to be a couple variables depending on just how many events you're talking about. Are you talking about throwing millions of events within a span of minutes? Is this, like how big of a spike in traffic are you potentially trying to engineer around? The other big thing for folks to consider when they're thinking about these sorts of performance trade-offs is just event size. Bigger events take longer to process. And then the other thing too is just, what is the Apex trigger doing? If it's doing a lot of processing and you're trying to pull in a lot of other data and do a lot of other things, that's going to make the Apex trigger take longer, and that's going to contribute to just what your overall throughput looks like. So for the most part, you're trying to keep things as simple as you can with small events, and you use that as a way to try and balance out some of those spikes.
Got it. And this is a question for you, Ross. So which of these integrations that we just talked about today, agentic integration, support private link or private connect?
Right. So at present, the synchronous options based around named credentials are the ones that can be configured with to run through Private Connect. We are on the way to moving certain pieces to where they need to be so that they can also be there for event relays. That's not there quite yet.
Got it. So demystify a little bit of what is private connect and private link for some of our beginner developers here.
Sure. Yeah. So if you're familiar with the AWS stack, you've probably heard of private link as a way for two VPCs to work with each other in a way that does not egress Amazon's network when they work with each other. Also, you can have your own jobs, like say, for example, EC2 instances needing to reach out to Amazon managed services like S3 or Dynamo. But to do that, you also don't want to egress Amazon's network, right? That would be like walking out the front door of your house just to walk back in the side door, right? And you don't want to do that, right? So private link provides a way to sort of stay within the house, so to speak, and keep that network traffic on the AWS side. So that's pretty popular and has a lot of different uses for the architectures that get configured on AWS, because you often have a lot of different services and microservices on the AWS side that you're connecting together. Like, a little bit of Dynamo, a little bit of EventBridge, a little bit of S3, a little bit of EC2, etc., to work together to complete the picture for a given application. Right? It's not uncommon to have multiple pieces going on. Then when you add Salesforce to that mix, the question becomes, how do I have this integration traffic between the two work in such a way that it doesn't go over the public internet? This is interesting for regulated industries, especially where there's an imperative for that traffic to be private as much as possible, right? But that's different from saying it has that performance benefit of avoiding the need to walk out the front door and come in the side door, right? That performance benefit by itself doesn't exist in a world where you're connecting across from your Salesforce stack to your AWS stack. You have to, go to the different VPC either way. So that piece is, you shouldn't be thinking of Private Connect as a way to squeeze out a little bit more performance. It's for an increased level of assurance around the fact that integration traffic never goes out and traverses the public internet. So what happens behind the scenes is we have our resources in a VPC that we manage, and it establishes a private link between our VPC and yours. And that is what we call Private Connect. But for those that are curious about how that works under the hood, its private link, and you'll receive an inbound request from us to allow a private link to the VPC of your choice, to the defined VPC endpoint that you've allowed just for that. It also does work the other way. So you can, for example, have a job in a Lambda or an EC2 instance or similar that's, say, for example, pushing leads into the Salesforce API. That's a pretty common use case. And that the directionality can go the other way as well, or you can establish a private link to our VPC. So hope that helps.
Got it. Yeah. Just to simplify, right? It's basically ensuring that you have the security in place so that the traffic that is flowing from Salesforce to your AWS instance doesn't go out via the internet. It still goes through your private network that you have configured.
Correct.
Yeah, awesome. So with that, there is another question here that really looks interesting. And again, now that you have driven into different services of AWS, I thought this is really interesting question. So Sally says, currently in her implementation, AWS is exposing HTTP APIs for Salesforce. Now, what is the difference between using these APIs and then, if something exists on, let's say, something like Amazon Bedrock? I think the connection here they're trying to make is, first of all, what is Amazon Bedrock? I think that is the bigger picture they're trying to understand. Like, what is Amazon Bedrock, and how is it like different than, like, let's say maybe Lambda or something?
Sure. Yeah. I wouldn't say that there's anything wrong with what you're describing, right? That plenty of use cases, lots of folks in production that have a call out that goes from Salesforce to an API gateway to then a Lambda or similar, right? Lots of folks are doing that every day, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If that meets your use case, then fantastic, right? You'd have a rationale to add Bedrock to the mix if you wanted the AWS side to, have some AI magic that takes some non-deterministic action, right, based on the inputs that come through, in this case, from Salesforce, right? So if that helps in the use case to, take the input and run it through the LLM and have it decide what to do, then Bedrock is the choice for how to do that. But if that's not needed, and you can go, and you're happy going to your API gateway, back to your Lambda, and then to whatever else is behind that, that's great as well.
Awesome. All right. So the next question is coming from Mudita from LinkedIn again. Thank you for your question. So what is the guidance on impact on platform event governor limits? I think this is obvious. Salesforce like always worrying about the limits, like platform event limits. Have any comment here, Tyson?
Yeah, I guess I don't think it changes much. The way you're using Agentforce, if you're using Apex underneath the hood to either invoke an agent or have an agent publish an event, you still have to think about the same underlying Apex governor limits. Same thing for entitlements. For the most part, when you're publishing and subscribing within Salesforce with Apex or Flow, you don't really care about the platform event publishing and delivery limits, just because it's not super relevant when you're within the platform. It's really when you're trying to integrate with an external service. But I saw another question in the chat that somebody asked where they're like, hey, what about my platform event limits? And for that, it's still the same, right? So if you are building external integrations with agents, when you're using Event Relay, everybody gets a default entitlement that they can use. And then if they need more events, they can purchase more. We encourage everybody to, if they are putting use cases into production that are building external integrations, we encourage everybody to get at least one platform event add-on license. And the reason for that is that you get a hard rate limit if you don't have an add-on license, and you get a soft rate limit if you have one. So that scenario where you go over your limit, we don't want to have to hard rate limit anybody. We know that really affects people's business, that impacts their integrations. It's not fun. So getting into that point where you've got that soft limit gives you a lot more flexibility to make that a lot more seamless.
Awesome. All right. So the next question is really interesting. Actually, this is not a question, but I picked it from one of the comments that I saw. Um, People are wondering about this whole idea of agentic integration and the tight coupling integrations. So you see, there is this tight coupling, and then we are slowly talking into this agentic experience and agentic integration. So I would like both of you to comment on this. First, I'll start with you, Tyson. Is like, how is agentic integration different, and what do you think about you know using that agentic integrations versus doing something like, let's say, a non-agentic way that we are used to in the past, which is like just relying on platform events, not using LLMs for orchestration and things like that.
Yeah, I guess like the immediate reaction that I have when I think about this is that it's not different. Like it's still integration, and like all of the skills that we've built up over the last however many years about like how to do enterprise systems integration,
Yeah.
it's still relevant today.
Mm.
And when I think about tight coupling or loose coupling, um, a lot of that goes into like, hey, well, what's the use case that you're trying to drive? And with agents, um, some nuance that's a little bit different about how agents work is that there's no such thing as a synchronous agent, right?
Mm.
Like all LLMs are working asynchronously. They're processing tokens as they come in, and they're
Yeah.
giving you tokens. And that is an asynchronous activity that for the most part, when you're actually building the integration, you can work around.
Mhm.
The patterns of like server-side events and integrating against the REST API to do that. There's some nuance there. I don't know if anybody cares to go into that. I'd be happy to take up more time going into it. I know Ross is very bored. He's wondering how he got here. He's full of regret.
Aren't we all? Yeah, no, I think the yeah, I see what you're saying, that you still need to apply most of the same critical thinking
Yeah.
skills, right?
Yeah.
I think what we're seeing that's interesting to me is that if an LLM is on one side or the other,
Yeah.
it can be a little looser, right? In the sense that let's say a MCP client calls MCP server, it doesn't need the strictest understanding of precisely what it's going to get back from that server for that to be useful, right?
Yeah.
So in the seeing in the MCP spec, that tool output description is optional, right?
Yeah.
And we'll see what the uptake is of that ever long term. I mean, put it in, great, but if the LLM is smart enough to not need it, why bother? So I think that's an interesting one. And then you take it to the next level by saying, well, there's an LLM on both sides. Now what happens, right? And then you move into the A to A space, and you have, like we're touching on earlier, the cards that explain to the other side what skills it has and all that, and that does get interesting. I would say, it gets again looser, right? More asynchronous, to Ty's point. Probably be seeing more of that over time, which should help in the sense of having those be less brittle, right? To be able to say, well, I can only cope with this exact output from this server, and that's all hard coded, against this exact way that I've built the client side, right? And it's nice to not have to stress about that as much.
And I think that like right now, a lot of the state of the industry, like when you're talking about multi-agent integration, it's really two agents, or it's like two orchestration agents that are talking to each other.
Mhm.
And that's why you can kind of squint and be like, yeah, it's kind of, you can do like a tight coupling. It's not exactly synchronous, but it's close enough that like the same mental model applies. And where I think we're going to be going is like as we have more agents, that starts to look increasingly like a PubSub model, where it might look like that either at the integration layer or within companies' implementations, where you have multiple agents that all need to coordinate with either each other or with an orchestration agent, and they're not going to be doing all of that synchronously, just because there's too many microservices at play here. There's too many business processes that are going on. So I think that increasingly a lot of that looks to using some of these tools that will be more loosely coupled, just to get the performance and realize the complexity of the business process that you have.
Got it. This is an interesting question, actually, based on the same topic that we are discussing. Now that you also brought in this MCP server thing, Ross, this is coming from Gregory. Gregory, thanks for your question. So, what is the difference between agent calling out to an HTTP REST API endpoint versus calling an MCP server. I know a lot of people are wrapping their brains around this still. Like, what is that difference between, an agent just calling this HTTP endpoint versus calling this MCP endpoint or MCP server?
Sure. Well, let me try to frame that more specifically within the context of Agentforce and what Agentforce is going to be up to. So Agentforce is a very close, safe harbor to their MCP client capability going into pilot, right? So in today's world already, with what's GA now, you can have what you described a second ago, which is that using what we've seen on screen here in the prior slides, Agentforce can reach out to external service, and the existing external services capability helps make that call out, sort of do that transit, get back the response, right, and feed it back to Agentforce itself for it to then process what's likely JSON coming from the other side, right? So to the point we touched on a second ago, that can get, let's call it, looser in a world where the other side is an MCP server and not just a traditional REST API, right? It may return not only, a variable JSON output, but it may not be JSON at all. It could be not text. It could be rich media, right?
Yeah.
Which an LLM can process, but most, I would argue, traditional REST-bound clients then probably would struggle with, right? Unless they were very specifically attuned to take in that audio file or what have you, right? But we don't have that problem in the world of LMs based on what they can take on. So you'll also see eventually support for things like resources in MCP, which will just anything identified by a URL, a PDF, could be a spreadsheet, whatever, right? And Agentforce will ping out to that, pull that in, and use it to enrich its context of what it's doing and with the subsequent actions.
Right.
So I think that's the most direct way to answer that question, which is that the MCP server will have the ability to bring back variable output, which the Agentforce LLM-powered client will be smart enough to be able to handle without worrying about, in the world of a REST API, you'd have to have different code, even if there was one new property that came back in the JSON, right? And you'd have to then adjust that code. So that's how I see it. Hope that helps.
Yeah. No, that is helpful, actually. So, for everyone, right, it's very simple. Like, these LLMs definitely have some sort of, I would say, super capabilities that none of these integration system ever had, like the ones that you mentioned, like being able to just read that binary file and also understand, right? I mean, there were systems which we could read and parse, and based on that we could write our own logic, etc. LLMs change that game because they can just read, they can understand, and then they can output something based on that. So definitely I can see this integrations between MCP server as becoming its own thing. Like, of course there will be HTTP REST endpoints, but there, with MCP server, a lot of things changes because of the reasons that we just spoke about. There's another interesting question coming from Nagesh from LinkedIn. Using multiple agents with AWS and, let's say, an external service like MuleSoft, they can impact the performance, right? So what are the best practices to use multiple sources on Agentforce? They're saying, how do they think about managing the performance when you have these large collections of integrations that are happening?
Sure. So let me try to take a stab at it, not being the world's foremost MuleSoft expert, but what I would look at, if you've got, let's call them client-side jobs, whether they're agentic or not, on AWS, reaching out to services that are fronted by or served by MuleSoft Anypoint, right? What I would look at in that situation is Anypoint's controls and governance capabilities and things like that can apply policies to how many calls can come in per hour and things like that to help manage, especially what oftentimes is legacy systems that MuleSoft is helping to service up, right?
Mhm.
You've got some legacy system that doesn't have a clean REST API, that there's no way to get to it. MuleSoft saves the day by solving for that last mile to then get a REST API in front of that. It could even be a green screen with RPA, right? But another piece that MuleSoft brings to the table to help is that policy and governance area, is to say, like, well, we can, this client that's coming in, right, and it may send a lot of traffic, but it's only going to be allowed to send through so many per hour, right?
Got
So
it.
that's something that you can dive deep into, because the anypoint capability is very rich and deep. That's a deep well, but that's what I would focus on if you've got, let's say, multiple Bedrock agents theoretically reaching against the same backend service that MuleSoft is fronting.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you for the response. So let's actually switch gears a bit and talk about some limits actually. Um, let's first talk about, how can we learn about how these events are getting used in my org? Is there any monitoring that is built for that, Tyson?
Yeah, great question. So, and just to go on the theme of limits. So, I saw there's a question about filtering and how
Yeah.
that impacts limits. So I'll circle back to that in the answer. The
Yeah.
shortest thing is there's some basic information in setup right now that shows you what your eventing usage is. We're going to make that a lot better coming out in the winter release.
Hmm.
And what people can look forward to is something called Event Studio. This is an area
Wow.
where we're kind of building out a lot of what it means to be building with events in setup, and
Mm.
trying to kind of uplift it and make it easier and address some of the pain points that folks have run into in the past.
Mm.
And the first thing that we're adding in is a UI that is explaining what's going on with enhanced usage metrics object,
Mhm.
which is a mouthful. So it's a lot of words in there. But that is the place to go to basically get a breakdown of what your event usage looks like. And you can drill down into different time segments. You can look at different specific events. And it gives you a much richer idea of what your usage looks like against your entitlements. So that's coming out in the winter release. The underlying enhanced usage metric object that
Mhm.
all of that is built on top of, that's available today. You can write a query against that with the metadata or tooling API.
Oh.
So you can do that right now. That's in our developer docs. We'll post a link to it so people can track it down. The other thing that's going to be coming out in the winter release is we created we're building agent actions around this, so you can talk to an agent in setup and basically say, hey, I how many events have I used in the last 24 hours? Like, what are the events that are contributing towards my delivery entitlement? And you can have a conversation with the agent to get a better understanding of what that usage looks like. So we're really excited about that. And then, yeah, if this is an area that folks want to talk about more, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. Like, this is like my passion about like how we can make this easier for people to work with. So I definitely want to hear from you. Circling back to the question about filtering, yeah, absolutely. Filtering is a great way to be careful about your limits. So
Mhm.
you can use filtering to make sure that you're not consuming events that you don't want. That's why we built filtering, is that we would have customers that would have to consume all these events and they would count against their entitlement. And then we'd get into these challenging situations where you would get all these events, you'd pay for them because they'd hit your entitlement, and then you'd have to throw them away on the client side. That's a bad experience. That's a waste of resources for people. So we built filtering so you don't have to do that. So you can use that feature with a platform event channel. You define what goes in the channel. You define what are the events that you want to go there and be in that channel for a subscriber to consume. And then those events that don't meet the filter criteria are not included in the channel, and they don't count against your delivery entitlement. So it's a great way to be thoughtful about what you want to consume. And it's also a method to introduce parallelism if you're trying to, say, consume an event stream with event relay, right? And you want to break up, say, a topic that has a bunch of different components in it. You can have multiple event relays that are all using filtering to have that in a parallel fashion. So it's a super powerful feature. We'll definitely link to that for folks that aren't familiar with stream filtering. But yeah, absolutely, check it out.
Awesome. And I have another question here about a streaming API client. Now, let's imagine somebody already has an implementation around streaming API client that today consumes platform events. How do they switch to this new PubSub API? We talked about the benefits of switching to this PubSub API, but how would they approach the implementation?
Yeah, so I won't dwell too much on PubSub API, but for folks that aren't familiar with it, this is like our new-ish API. It's been out since 2022. We built it specifically for working with platform events and changed it to capture and real-time event monitoring. So it's like our event-driven architecture API at Salesforce.
Mhm.
It's got better, like a richer feature set and better performance than streaming API and our traditional core-bound REST APIs. So it's one of those like better performance, better feature, no brainer kind of pieces if you're doing a new implementation. If you're trying to get up and running and figure out, great, how do I build with this thing? We have a bunch of examples. Because PubSub API is a gRPC API, you can use any of the supported gRPC languages. I believe there's 11 languages these days.
Oh, wow.
So we've got examples in our best examples in Java. There's also a good set of examples in Go. We have examples in Python, and there's a few examples for some of the RPCs in Node. I think that we've also had some community submitted examples in
That's awesome.
yeah, in some other languages too. So there's a lot of examples that are out there. I'll also encourage people that it is like these examples have been ingested by LLMs. If you want to talk to Cursor about building a PubSub client, it will help you.
Yeah.
We've played with this internally, and it's a powerful way to get up and running quicker.
Yeah, thanks for the examples. Actually, I mean, with LLMs, all these content, especially the code examples, they are real gem at this point because they can
They
really
are.
get you quickly
And,
started instead of having you.
and candidly, it's super exciting. And this is the thing that I've been thinking about is like, wow, it's really easy to generate code with all of these like agent assisted IDEs.
Yeah.
How does Salesforce help agents generate better code? Like, how do we make sure that agents aren't creating like client slop that's going to be challenging for customers to run in production? So, I don't know how many fingers we want on a client for PubSub API, but
Right.
as long as it can pass the Turing test, that's what we're looking for.
Awesome. And here's another question: is can these event relays send events to other destination, like not AWS, let's say Azure or something like that?
It's the dream one day.
Okay, got it. Cool. I think we are almost here, coming to the end of the conversation. Again, just a reminder to everyone, right? Feel free to use our developer community actually to post your questions. Let me see if I can bring back my presentation so I can share with you how you can join our global network of people. So here it is again. So connect with other developers here. Join this Salesforce developer community. We are all here and are looking to help each other. Also, I want to remind everyone about Agentforce now that we have. So we do lots of hands-on with Agentforce. I can directly learn from experts through workshops, through AMAs, code lives. And if you want to find out what's our next event, check out that QR code that I have here. Just pull up your phone, scan them, go, or if you don't have camera at phone, maybe you're on laptop, just type this URL that is right there, sforce.co/agentforce-now. So you will see the list of events that are happening. We're really looking forward to seeing you in some of these events. And also, of course, I just want to remind Dreamforce is also coming. So there will be lots of enablement sessions and exciting content like this. And then I want to take a moment here and thank everyone here, including you, Tyson, and Ross. Thank you so much for taking your time from your busy work, and thank you everyone, for tuning in today. And we hope to continue AMA for the next one too. So check out our resources that we have here using salesforce.com/dev community, where you can find our YouTube channel, our social media channels, and also our LinkedIn handle. So with that, any parting thoughts here from you, Ross and Tyson?
I'll just echo what you're saying. It's fantastic to see so many people on today. We've loved getting the questions. Please feel free to keep connecting with us. I really appreciate the feedback that folks have on how they can work with event-driven integrations better. Like this is what we're trying to do. So please keep the feedback coming. It is super helpful. And also just having stories from customers is super helpful for just kind of grounding like the why of when we're building these features and when we're kind of building our roadmaps as product managers. Like hearing from customers directly is a fantastic way for us to tell a story about like the emotional resonance of why we want to build these features and what it means for folks. So please keep connecting with us on this. We love it. And then also for the folks that are coming to Dreamforce or considering it, like it's going to be a great show. Ross and I are going to be there. We're going to have booths. We're going to have sessions. Like, you got to come on down. It's going to be great. Ross, you got something fun planned, right?
Yes, yeah, you'll see us there for sure. We'll be in and around API booth and some other places, some other fun surprises that we'll be talking about soon. I echo the messages saying, yeah, we're on LinkedIn, but we would love to see you on the developer community, get the conversation going, not just one-to-one with us, but also, to help each other. So to get that dev community, Trailblazer community, helpful to everyone.
All right. With that, thank you everyone, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much.
See everybody.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.